on to Shefali ji. The title of the paper is Om Namo Narayana, a study of Vaishnavism among the Gowd Saraswat Brahmins.
Vaishnavism among GSBs. Disclaimer, this is actually a small drop in the ocean that is Vaishnavism. So I am really looking at it from a very macro lens. So forgive me if there is no greater picture involved here, but this is my way of going back to my ancestors and trying to understand their faith. So first, let me tell you a little bit about the GSBs, the Gowd Saraswat Brahmins. It's a community that is roughly a merger of Konkani speaking Brahmin communities, including there are various subgroups like Shenvis, Sashtikas, mainly from the geographic regions where they are from, like Sasti is a district in Goa, Bardesh is a district from Goa, Pedne is a district from Goa, Kudaldeshkar and Chanepeki. Two things they have in common. One is they all have a common mother tongue, which is Konkani. And secondly, all their Kuladevata temples are located in Goa. So wherever the Konkanis may be living, whether it is in Karnataka, whether it is in Kerala, whether it is in Mumbai, whether it is wherever, but their Kuladevata temple will be located in Goa, and usually most people go to Goa once a year to do their Kuladevata Yatra. Smarta GSBs worship 5 main deities: Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, Surya and Ganesh. Panchayatan form of worship. Originally, all Konkani speaking Brahmin communities followed the Smarta tradition. Later on, with the influence of Sri Madhvacharya's teaching, a significant group, particularly from Salset, that is Sashti, started following the Vaishnava tradition. The Saraswats themselves are mentioned in the Vedas, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata as the people who resided in the basin of the Saraswati river. But due to the tectonic shifts in the Himalayan region, the river Saraswati started to dry up. As a result, the famine forced the people to migrate wherever they could find food, basically. So some went to Kashmir, while others went to Thirtha, which is in today's Bihar. There are 2 different theories about how the prefix Gowd came to be used to describe the Dakshinatya Saraswats. One theory suggests that the Konkani speaking Brahmins were called Gowd because they were followers of monism as preached by Sri Gaudapadacharya, who was the Paratpar Guru of Adi Shankaracharya. According to this theory, the GSBs came to Goa via the sea route through Dwarka. Therefore, they are still known as Dorke. And this is mentioned in the Baroda State Gazetteer of 1923, and it is there in many of the history of the Saraswat community. The other theory suggests that Dakshinatya Saraswats came to Goa from Tihotra in Bihar, a region then known as Gaudadesh. That's how they got this appellate Gauda attached to this. And the legend is that these Brahmins were brought to Goa, which was reclaimed as Parshurama Kshetra from the sea, and you can see the picture here, by Sri Parshuram, and when they were invited here to officiate on the Yajna by Parshurama, they brought with them their family deities, which were Mangirish, Shakti, that is Shanta Durga, Sri Vishnu, Ganesh and Surya, and these 5 deities formed a Panchayatan, that is the bedrock of the Smarta worship. Sahyadri Khanda of the Skanda Purana states this legend that Rishi Parshurama brought 96 families of Brahmins from Tihotra and settled them in Goa. And today's names of many places in Goa are a continuation of that legend. The names haven't changed. A lot of transitions have happened, a lot of demographic changes have happened, but the names of the places remained the same. So 66 families were settled in an area known as Sahasashti, meaning 66, and 30 were settled in an area known as Tiswadi. Later, 12 more families arrived and settled in an area known as Baradesh, literally meaning the land of 12 families. And together, they form 96 families. This story is also repeated in Konkanakhyan, a Marathi epic composed by an anonymous poet in Goa in early 18th century. Devi worship is very common among the Saraswats of Goa, both among the Smartas and the Vaishnavas. Basti Pundalik Shanoy, who has written the history of Saraswat Brahmins, he attributes it to the Shakta and Tantra traditions of Eastern India, from where he says that from Thirtha and Gowd Desha, when they came, they carried with them the Tantric traditions of Devi worship. Now we come to how the GSB, a section of the GSB community in Goa, how they got interested in Vaishnavism. In 13th century, Sri Madhvacharya, he came to Goa, and his philosophy, to the best of my knowledge, was that Sri Vishnu is the ultimate truth, with Vayu being the mediator between the Jivatma and the Paramatma. Hari Sarvottam, Vayu Jivottam is the main mantra followed by the Vaishnavas that subscribe to the Madhva Mata, and that is in fact the Ghoshavakya of Sri Gokarna Partagari Matha, which was one of the two Vaishnava Mathas that the GSBs take their spiritual teachings from. A poem extolling the spiritual victories of Madhvacharya, Sri Madhva Vijaya, mentions that the Saraswat Brahmins of Goa were Smartas before Sri Madhvacharya introduced them to Vaishnavism. This is mentioned by Sri V.P. Chauhan in Vaishnavism of the Gowd Saraswat Brahmins, a book which studies this phenomena. But what happened was the Vaishnava GSBs continued to worship their old Shaivite Kuladevatas such as Sri Ramnath, Sri Nagesh and Sri Ravalnath, which are basically different forms of Shiva located in different places in Goa. GSBs worship Sri Damodar, who is a form of Krishna, in the temple of Vrivna. He is a form of Sri Vishnu, but as you can see in the photograph, he is worshipped in the Linga form. Similarly, in Goa, there is another Vishnu temple, which is the Lakshmi Narasimha temple, where also there is a murti of Lakshmi Narasimha, but there is also a Linga-like structure that is worshipped, which is worshipped as Thanu, the pillar from which Narasimha is said to have manifested himself. But at the same time, there are scholars who have called it a Linga also. Mahalsa Narayani, this is, I think, the most curious example. She is the Kuladevata of many GSBs, including mine, and she is worshipped as Mohini, the female incarnation of Sri Vishnu. It is the murti of a goddess, but she wears a Yagyopavit, the only murti like that in Goa, and is offered garlands of tulasi leaves, which are the favorites of Sri Vishnu. On Ekadasi days, the murti is adorned with Shringara of many different forms of Vishnu, including Vithoba Shringara, Tirupati Venkatramana Shringara, Sri Ram, Sri Krishna Shringara. On Janmashtami, she is worshipped as Sri Krishna. And if you see the iconography of the murti here, you can see that there are no visible symbols of Vaishnavism anywhere. There is no Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma anywhere. In fact, she has a Trishul. She has the head of a Rakshasa in her hand. The other hand also has a head of a Rakshasa, which is decapacitated. And there is a tiger-like animal, it's a tiger only, which is basically licking the blood off the head. So the left upper hand has a kalasha, a small kalasha, which you can see here. Vaishnavas believe it to be the pot of Amrita, that is why the Mohini legend. While Shaivas believe it to be the Sura Bhajan, which is alluded to in the description of some tantric texts as something that Bhagavati has in her hand. Left lower hand of the Devi holds a severed head, as you can see. But the most important thing is, even though there are no visible Vaishnav symbols like the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, the murti is worshipped as a form of Sri Vishnu. But in Maharashtra, the same Mahalsa Devi is also worshipped as a consort of Khandoba, who is a form of Shiva. Iconographically, it's obvious to me that the murti is closer to the form of Durga than Mohini. In his book Folk Gods of the South, Khandoba, Rachi Dhere had opined that the goddess mentioned at Malza Devi or Malchi Devi in the 11th century Kannada inscriptions of Devi Hosur refers to Mahalasa as a Shakta goddess, but in the same book he also mentions references including a quote by Sant Jnaneshwar in Eknath that mentions the unification of Mahalsa and Mohini. In short, Goddess Mahalsa to me best symbolizes the syncretism between the Smarta and Vaishnava traditions among GSBs. Now we come to the history of Saraswat Mathas and why those Mathas were so important. Goa has had a very violent history. The Saraswat have had to migrate many times and not many of these migrations were voluntary. They had to migrate because they were oppressed many times, first by the Islamic rulers and then by the Portuguese. So Shri Gaudapadacharya Matha was established in Keloshi, that's a village in South Goa, in 8th century CE, which was destroyed by the Portuguese, and the mutt was later shifted to Kaivalyapura or Kaule, where it is now, in 1564. Spiritual heads of this matha are known as Gaudapadacharya because they follow the tradition of Gaudapadacharya, who is, as I said, is the Paratpar Guru of Adi Shankaracharya. And the Kaule Matha is known as the Adi Matha, the first matha of the GSB community. Although it's a Shaivite math, the Vaishnavite GSBs also worship Adi Matha, and they also visit and they also hold the Guru in equal reverence. So there are 4 main mathas that Saraswats follow. 2 of them follow the Shaiva Matha today, and 2 of them follow the Vaishnav Matha. Kaivalya Matha, which I just told you, and Shirari Matha, these are the 2 mathas that follow the Shaivite tradition, whereas Gokarna Parthagali Matha and Kashi Matha are the mathas that follow the Vaishnava traditions in the Madhva school. In 13th century, Sri Madhvacharya's philosophy became popular in Goa, and many Saraswats adopted Vaishnavism because it was a bhakti doctrine. It was a doctrine that was easier to follow. First Vaishnava Saraswat Math was established in the year 1475 when Sri Narayana Thirtha was initiated into sannyasa at Badrikashrama, that's Badri, by Sri Ramachandra Tirtha Swamiji of Palimaru Matha. So there is this very strong connection of Kokan Parthagali Matha with one of the Ashtamathas of the Madhvas. Unbroken Guru Parampara of this math, starting from the first Guru, Srimad Narayan Tirtha in 1475 to the current Mathadish, Srimad Vidyatirtha Swami, Vidyadhish Tirtha Swamiji, is mentioned on the Matha website also. And if you visit the Matha, there is a clear lineage there, which is documented, thankfully. So third head of this Matha, Srimad Jivottam Tirth, was a great scholar. He travelled all over India in 15th century, including Kailas Mansarovar. And the Math at Parthagali was founded by the 6th Guru, Srimad Ramachandra Tirtha. The Gokan Parthagali Math provides spiritual guidance to the Sashtikar families of Saraswats who remained in Goa. When the Portuguese were oppressing Goa, at that point of time, a very small part of today's Goa was under the Portuguese, when the most terrible conversions and the oppressions happened. So a lot of people moved out. Some of them moved outside of Goa to what is Goa today. But some stayed, like my family, they moved from their ancestral village of Verna to a place called Konkolim, which is in today's Goa. But at that point of time, it was still under Hindu rulers. So the Gokan Parthagali Math provided spiritual guidance for people like that. Legend says that the third Mathadish found 3 Vitthal Murtis in the river in Nepal, made from Panchaloha. He named them Bhuvijay Vitthal, Digvijay Vitthal and Veera Vitthal. And he started a math at Gokarn, where the first Murti is still there. Second Murti is there at Basrur. And the third Murti is in the daily worship, which current Pitadish still carries with him wherever he goes. These 3 Murtis of Sri Vitthal signify the 3 attributes of Vaishnavism: Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika and Adhyatmika. Now we come to the second math, Kashi Math Samsthan, and this is a very interesting theory, interesting history of this math, because as I said, the exodus of Saraswats, the biggest one was after the Portuguese oppression in the 16th and 17th centuries, but Hindu migration had already started in the 14th century when Goa was attacked by Islamic invaders and many temples were destroyed. So there are some temples in Goa which were destroyed twice, like the Saptakoteshwar temple, which was once destroyed by the Muslims, then rebuilt during the reign of the Vijayanagar Empire, and then destroyed by the Portuguese again. So the Saraswats had to migrate even before the Portuguese came to Goa. The Kerala District Gazetteer of Ernakulam says that the Gowd Saraswat Brahmins, locally called Konkanis, are immigrants from Goa, the southernmost part of Konkan. They are also known as Sashtikars, as it is believed that they belong to Sashti, modern Salset in Goa. So Kashi Math Samsthan, the picture that you see here is this famous image by James Prinsep, which was taken in 1822. It is of Brahmaghat. It's in his book on the lithographs of Banaras. But what is interesting is that this building houses the Kashi Math headquarters in Varanasi, and the building has not changed. It looks exactly the same even today. Most of the Saraswats who had migrated from Sashti to Kerala had become Vaishnavas already under the influence of Madhvacharya. As they found travel to Goa increasingly difficult in the 16th century following the Portuguese policy of rigid religious persecution, they could not visit their Kuladevata temples, and that was very important for them for their spiritual needs. So they started following the local mutt in Kumbakonam nearby. When Srimad Vijayendra Tirtha Swamiji was observing Chaturmas in Kochi, the Gowd Saraswat Brahmins there made a request that they had language issues, they couldn't go back to Goa, so they wanted a separate Dharmapeeth with somebody from their own community as the Dharma Guru. He acceded to the request and a young boy from the community was initiated into sannyasa in Varanasi. He was named Sri Yadavendra Tirtha. The photograph that you see is the unbroken Guru lineage of the Kashi Matha. And Srimad Yadavendra Tirtha Swamiji became the Mathadipati of Kashi Math Samsthan in 1542. And what is interesting is that the prominent deities of this Math are Sri Vedavyasa, bestowing Jnana, Sri Rama, who is the embodiment of Dharma, and Sri Narasimha, who signifies fearlessness. All Vaishnav GSBs today are followers of either Sri Gokarn Partagari Math or Sri Kashi Math Samsthan. So what does being Vaishnav and a GSB involved? So, one of the major rites that all Vaishnav GSBs follow is Thirtha Mudra Dharana, as many people have already spoken about it. The picture that you see, these mudras are actually from my family. They have been with us for more than 100 years. So, my grandparents, their grandparents probably also use them for their daily worship. So, Mudra Dharana, they had to take Thirtha Mudra Dharana once a year from the Swamiji. But apart from that, even during the daily Sandhya Vandana Puja, the Vaishnava Saraswat is supposed to mark themselves with the symbols of Sri Vishnu, Shankha, Chakra, Gada and Padma and using Gopi Chandan. And in addition, there is a square stamp called a Narayan Mudra with 9 small squares, each bearing a letter from the Narayan Ashtakara Mantra, Om Namo Narayana. It has to be used on the navel. This is where the title of my presentation comes from. Till a few decades ago, when people wanted to look different, the Vaishnava GSBs and the Shaiva GSBs, the Vaishnava GSBs used a vertical mark, even their women, and the Shaiva GSBs used a horizontal mark. And the Vaishnava GSBs used to put a tulasi leaf over their ear every day. Now they do it only during the pujas. And Vaishnava GSPs at the end of any religious puja or any religious function would offer the final offering of the water and end the puja with Krishnarpanamastu, whereas the Shaivite GSPs used to say Brahmarpanamastu. And there are, this is said in jest, that there were such rivalry between the Shaivas and Vaishnavas, not violent rivalry, more like friendly jostling, that stitching clothes is known as kapde shivap in Konkani. So the Vaishnavas apparently used to call it kapde Vaishnavap because they didn't want to say shivap. This is a joke because my own grandfather had an arranged marriage. He was a Vaishnava GSB with a Shaiva GSB lady, my grandmother, more than 100 years ago. So I don't think the rivalry was as watertight or as acrimonious as it is made out to be. The biggest festivals that I remember in my childhood and even today in Goa across the society are Tulsi Vivaha, which is a very Vaishnava festival, and Ganesh Chaturthi, which is also celebrated with equal fervor. So that tells you that even though the GSBs sort of changed their way of worship to Vaishnavism, they did not let go of their earlier smarta ways of worship, and there was no rivalry. There was no such thing as Shaivites will not go to a Vaishnava temple or Vaishnavas will not go to a Shaiva temple. It was a milder, gentler, syncretic form of worship. The Konkani sayings prove this. Sayings usually are folk wisdom and will tell you what the community really feels. So there are sayings like Aslyar Ashtam, Nazalyar Ekadas, meaning if you have a lot of money, you celebrate like it's Janmashtami. If you don't have anything, then it's Ekadasi anyway, then you're going to fast. Then the second saying says Shivratri Ker Ekadas Aili. If one poor person goes to eat at another poor person's place, then it's like Shivratri pe upvas hota hi hai, Ekadasi pe bhi upvas hota hi hai. Both people come together, then both are going to go hungry. Otun gelle doodh Krishna karpan. This is a very typically Konkani saying that आपका milk spilt हो गया, गिर गया. So you gather some punya by saying that, oh, I offered it to Krishna anyway. So that will reduce that pain of losing the milk somehow. Utsalle kaden Ekadas, dille kaden Shivratri, meaning the house that she was born in was celebrating Ekadashi, but where she was married, it's Shivratri all the time, meaning that she was born in a poor family, she's married into a poor family. So these are the things that will tell you that the GSBs across the board, whether they be Smarta or Vaishnava, they worshipped all gods, and the Vaishnavism was more like Vishnu became your personal god. Apart from that, you also have your Kula Devatas. Apart from that, you also have your Grama Devatas. But Sri Vishnu is your personal deity that you pay obeisance to. In conclusion, Vaishnavite movement spearheaded by Madhvacharya is a great religious movement that provided spiritual guidance and succor to GSB community, which was forced to migrate multiple times. And this is where the two Vaishnava mathas played a great role, because the people had to migrate to different places. They had to migrate to Karnataka, they had to migrate to Kerala, some had to migrate to Maharashtra, and they could not come to Goa to do their Kuladevata worship. So how to keep your faith alive, how to keep your language alive, how to keep your belief in your gods alive, for that you needed the spiritual guidance of these mathas, and that is what these two mathas have been doing since 15th century. The two Vaishnava mathas, Sri Samsan Gokarna Partakali Jivattam Math and Sri Kashi Math, have done a human service in providing spiritual guidance to a community in distress. These are my references, and thank you for listening so patiently. I guess we don't have time for questions. Do we?
Yeah. One or two questions.
Okay. Does anybody have questions?
One or two questions.
Yeah.
Mike.
Because the Brahminhood was questioned, especially in by the Nambudris of Kerala and all, and they were never allowed to enter into the temples.
Yeah.
So that
is because of the pescatarian diet mainly. So the legend that says that the Saraswat started eating fish because when the river Saraswati started to dry up, there was no vegetables or there was no vegetarian food available. And as an apadharma, their guru Saraswat Muni told them that you could eat fish to survive. And that practice continued. So because of that, not only this, there were actually a proper, how would I call it, discussion in the court of Peshwas to ratify whether the Saraswat can be called full Brahmins or whether they're called half Brahmins, as in they have the right to do Veda Dhyan, but they don't have the right to teach Vedas. That was considered like that for a long time. But the Peshwas said that the Saraswats are full Brahmins, so they have the right both to learn Vedas and to teach Vedas.
Any other question?
Thank you, madam, for the interesting presentation. My question was, the Portuguese ruled for a long time, till 1961.
Yes.
And the Maratha Empire is just adjacent to Goa.
Yes.
So, did the Gowd Saraswat Brahmins make any representation to a Peshwas?
Huge. Actually, what happened was, most of the religious oppression happened in the 16th century and early 17th century. That was the time the Portuguese controlled mainly 3 districts, that's Salsette, Bardez and Tiswadi. So, maximum temple destructions happened there. And the murtis from there were taken to Ponda, which was at that point of time not a part of the Portuguese Empire. And those murtis were housed in small huts for a long time. And the Saraswats and all Hindus started to migrate because the Portuguese said that you have only 3 choices. Either you convert, you will get killed, or you have to become Christians. So those who didn't want to become Christians migrated. Many of them became very high-ranking officials in the Peshwa court. And when that happened, they had finally the political power and the monetary power to come back to Goa and rebuild their temples. So all the temples that you see today, the big temples like the Shantadurga temple of Kovle, like the Mangeshi temple, are actually built from the money and the power that was bestowed upon them by the Saraswats in the Peshwa court. So they insisted that land should be given, and because of that, they didn't do any actual attack after the Vasai attack. After Chimaji Bajarao's brother defeated the Portuguese decisively in Vasai, the Portuguese really became a lot less oppressive. And after that, they never touched the Goan temples after the 18th century.
Okay, because of the Inquisition, they moved inland. No, that is what.
No, the Inquisition was going on. In between, there was a break. Inquisition is a different story. Inquisition was mainly targeted at the converted Christians because they kept going back to their ways.
Okay.
So that's a whole different topic altogether.
Okay.
But later on, in the 18th century, there was not that much religious persecution in Goa. That is why you see the demographic profile of Goa that's very different. Like if you see coastal Goa, almost 80 to 90% of it is Christian dominated. But inland Goa, which were conquered later, you will see a majority of Hindus. That is why Goa still is a majority Hindu state. Thank you.